Hello and welcome to this video in which we are going to be talking and discussing the chapter called the Silk Road. On the face of it, ये आपको काफी boring chapter लग सकता है. मुझे भी पहले यही लगा था. लेकिन when you actually read it, you realize that it's actually a lot of description about a place which we haven't discovered, which we haven't seen, which we haven't traveled to before. So in that sense, it's an absolutely new kind of a description about a place we have not visited. Most of us at least have not visited. Now, who is the author of this particular article? It's written by Nick Middleton, who was a professor of geography at Oxford University, widely traveled, also an environmental consultant. Pehli baat, what is Silk Road? Okay, is it a road where silk saris are sold? Or is it a road which is carpeted with silk? None of the above. It's basically an ancient trade route. Okay, trade route that linked the Western world, mainly Europe, with China. Okay, Middle East and China. And the route, it was the route between the Roman Empire and China, and later on it became between Europe and China. It spans about 6,400 kilometers. So in that sense, it is a real commercial route, and it played an important role in kind of encouraging cultural, economic, and social relationships between people from different continents, between the East and the West. Okay. It's also referred to as a Silk Route, Silk Road or Silk Route. Okay. What was traded? Obviously, silk. Silk went from the east to the west, while wool, gold and silver came from the west to the east. So this was what was traded on the Silk Road. It also had its social implications, social and religious implications, because China also received Christianity and Buddhism to a large extent through the Silk Road, mainly from India. Now, who controlled the Silk Road? Now, this is not really part of this thing, but generally for GK. Mainly the Kushana dynasty, jinke ki major centers of power were Peshawar and Mathura. Very strange. Even I did not know that. Okay. Now the author in this particular story wants to explore Mount Kailash and wanted to perform what is called the Kora, K-O-R-A, which is a pilgrimage and meditative practice among the Tibetan Buddhists. Okay, it basically means going around a sacred site. Mount Kailash ko Hinduism mein it's considered the abode of Lord Shiva. इसीलिए उसके ऊपर कोई नहीं चढ़ता. It's considered sacrilege if you get on top of Mount Kailash, which is why no expedition has gone on top of Mount Kailash. Okay. There are 4 characters mainly in this particular chapter. The author, Nick Middleton himself. There is a guy called Satan. T is silent. He's the owner of the car who is hired by the author. He's also the tourist guide. Then there's a guy called Daniel, who is the interpreter from a place called Lhasa. And Norbu, who he meets, who is a Tibetan who works in Beijing in China, who he meets later on in the story, in the last part of the story. Okay, before we get into the story, why is Mount Kailash so important? Hinduism ki to maine baat aapko already bata di. Even for Tibetans, they believe that it was the ancient spiritual seat of power. Okay, this information you can use in your answers if you get that kind of a question. I put it down in the notes. Okay, in Buddhism, the mountain holds great significance because they also saw it as a central point of the rotation of the entire universe, the entire cosmos. Okay, now before we get into that, summary बता दूं. हिंदी में जल्दी से बता देता हूं 5-6 points में ताकि आपको आसानी हो. The author leaves a place called Ravu along with Daniel and Satan, and there is a lot of description of what happens on the way, and the journey gradually becomes tougher because there is snowfall. उन्होंने उम्मीद की थी कि अगर स्नोफॉल नहीं होगा तो शॉर्टकट से जो निकल रहे हैं उससे वे जल्दी पहुंच जाएंगे, लेकिन स्नोफॉल हुआ, गाड़ी अटक गई, गाड़ी पंचर हुआ, everything that could go wrong started going wrong. Okay, then the author started beginning to feel sick. They reached a place called Hor, H-O-R town, on the shore of Lake Mansarovar. इसका तो नाम आपने सुना होगा. Daniel returns to Lhasa from there. So only Satan and the author remain. And he does not like Hor. Then he falls sick. So they reach a place called Darchan, where he's not sick. He goes to the Darchan Medical College for medication. He's given some medicine. Satan leaves the author in Darchan because he wants to complete the Kora. So he waits for somebody who will know English, with who he can go on that pilgrimage, and finally finds this place called a person called Norbu, who knows English and who is also come there to perform the Kora. Okay, so that's essentially the story. स्टोरी में इतना ही है, कोई ट्विस्ट नहीं है टेल में. ओके, इट्स अ वेरी प्लेन, very linear story. What marks a story is about the description of the place. उसके बारे में we will read in detail. Okay. A flawless half moon floated in a perfect blue sky on the morning we said our goodbyes. Now goodbyes वो किसको बोल रहे हैं? They are leaving from this place called Ravu, RAVU, and he's saying goodbye to this lady called Lamo. Okay, जिनके की probably motel या छोटे से होटल वगैरह में कहीं पे रहे होंगे. Okay, so they are saying their goodbyes. Flawless means something which does not have any kind of defect. So a flawless half moon, perfect blue moon. कभी कभी चांद आपको दिन में भी दिखता है, सुबह सुबह भी दिखता है. It's a crescent. So it is there. A very flawless means almost perfect. Okay, half moon is there on the bright blue sky. So आपको बहुत ही light में आपको चांद अभी भी दिखेगा. On the morning when they were saying their goodbye. Extended banks of clouds, clouds almost looking like river banks. That's why he's used the word banks of cloud, like long French loaves. French loaves are essentially thin loaf of French bread. Glowed pink as the sun emerged to splash the distant mountain tops with a rose tinted blush. So, they are almost making the mountains look rosy, as though with rosy cheeks. So it's kind of describing the scenery, right? The mountain peaks are looking almost like with a rose tint. Now that we were leaving Ravu, Lamo said that she wanted to give me a farewell present. So obviously he has probably stayed there for a few days. One evening I had told her through Daniel that I was heading towards Mount Kailash to complete the Kora. Kora is a pilgrimage for Tibetans, जैसा मैंने आपको कहा. And she had said, I ought to get some warmer clothes. वहां पर सर्दी होगी, so you need to get some warm clothes. After ducking back means going inside very quickly into her tent. Obviously, it's a shorter door, so she ducks. Okay, she emerged carrying one of the long-sleeved sheepskin coats that all the men wore. So it also shows a generous kind of a spirit that she wants to give him a gift. It's a long-sleeved sheepskin से बना हुआ है, जिससे कि गर्मी लगेगी, सर्दी नहीं लगेगी, to keep him warm. And all the men of that area wore that sheepskin coat. Satan sized me up as we clambered into his car. Clambered means climbing with difficulty. Sized me up मतलब ऊपर से नीचे देखना. Okay, you're looking at somebody like that. Okay. Yes, he declared. Drogba, sir. Drogba is a nomad shepherd. So in this case, he's trying to say, oh, you look like a nomad shepherd. So nomad shepherds, जो बकरियां चराते हैं, they are the ones who wear this kind of sheepskin long-sleeved coats. We took a shortcut to get off the Changtang. Satan knew a route that would take us southwest almost directly towards Mount Kailash. तो उसको एक route मालूम है. He is aware of a road that will take them directly towards Mount Kailash, but it's a shortcut. Okay, इसमें खतरा क्या है? It involved crossing several fairly high mountain passes. Okay, so there is a bit of a risk because it involves traveling on this kind of a route. But he said, no problem, sir. If there is no snow, if there is no snow, कोई problem नहीं होगा. But if there is snowfall on the mountain ranges, driving through that route can be little tough and risky. What was the likelihood of that? I asked. That is, snow होगा यानी उसके likelihood क्या, chances क्या हैं? Not knowing, sir, until we get there. जब तक हम नहीं पहुंचेंगे नहीं पता चलेगा. Obviously, this was all before the GPS and the weather pattern kind of days. So obviously, there is no awareness. From the gently rolling hills of Ravu, Ravu is obviously in the an area where there is not kind of, harsh snowfall or harsh weather. The shortcut took us across vast open plains with nothing in them except a few gazelles that would look up from nibbling the arid pastures and frown before bounding away into the void. मैंने सारे word meanings लिखे हुए हैं, about 45 of them, तो कोई दिक्कत नहीं होगी. Changtang is a place in the western part of Tibet. Gazelle are small antelopes. Okay, one form of deer. Arid means dry. Okay, void means empty spaces. So वो बकरियां चरा, they are eating and then they look up when these people are going in their vehicle and they continue to do that. Okay, further on where the plains became more stony than grassy, a great herd of wild ass came into view. Satan said we were approaching long before they appeared. That is, we were approaching them that we were able to see them before. I mean, before they appeared, we were a kind of approaching those wild asses. When we drew, and he said Kang, he said pointing towards a far off pall of dust. Kang is the name for wild ass. Pall of dust means a cloud of dust. Okay. When we drew near, I could see the herd galloping en masse in a group, wheeling and turning in tight formation as if they were practicing maneuvers. Maneuvers means movements involving a large number of animals in this particular case on some predetermined course, as though, they knew that this is the thing. It's almost like herd mentality. If you see sheep, they all grow together. The animals generally have a tendency to stick together, a herd of sheep, right? Flock of sheep, sorry. Plumes of dust billowed into the crisp, clean air. Billowed means swelling out. Okay. As hills started to push up once more from the rocky wilderness. So इसमें कुछ समझने को ज़्यादा कुछ नहीं है. You just need to know the word meanings and just understand the description and some of the things you will need to remember for you to write in your answers. So it's not a complex chapter. It's not like the adventure, definitely. Okay. As hills started to push up once more from the rocky wilderness, we passed solitary drogbas, the nomad shepherds. Rocky wilderness मतलब काफी सारे rocks the. Wilderness means there was nobody there. It is all quiet. There is no humans that could be seen, or very few humans in that sense. We passed solitary drogbas, means very few shepherds, who were just one in number, tending their flocks of sheep. Sometimes men, sometimes women, these well-wrapped figures. Well-wrapped meaning they were also wearing that long-sleeve sheepskin coats, would pause and stare at our car, occasionally waving as we passed. When the track took us close to their animals, the sheep would take evasive action. Evasive action means बच के रहने के लिए, ताकि वो the car should not run them over, right? Veering away from the speeding vehicle. Veering means थोड़ा सावधान रहे, move away from the speeding vehicle. We passed nomads' dark tents pitched in splendid isolation. Splendid isolation because there is nobody else. There is not much of human habitation. So there will be just one tent in the middle of nowhere, right? Amidst the hills and the valleys. Usually with a huge black dog, a Tibetan Mastiff. A Tibetan Mastiff is a large and strong breed of dog, standing guard. So the tents would always have this Tibetan Mastiff. These bees, he calls them bees because they are very ferocious, would cock their great big heads when they became aware of our approach. When they would see the car coming and fix us in their sights, they would kind of keep looking at them because you are strangers. As we continue to draw closer, they would explode into action, speeding directly towards us. कुत्ते गाड़ियों के पीछे भागते हैं. ये कुत्ते मुंबई के हो, हैदराबाद के हो, कोलकाता के हो, या वहां तिब्बत में हो, सभी डॉग्स गाड़ियों के पीछे भागते हैं. So speeding directly towards us like a bullet from a gun and nearly as fast. Okay, so it's just describing. Look, just understand the description of this particular story. These shaggy monsters. Now first he called them bees. Now he calls them monsters. Monsters because shaggy means long, thick, and untidy. Okay, obviously they have a lot of hair. These shaggy monsters, blacker than the darkest night, usually wore bright red collars. So black skin, red collars, and barked furiously with massive jaws. They were completely fearless of our vehicle. उनको डर नहीं लग रहा था. They were not scared of the vehicle, even though that was of a stranger. Shooting straight into our path, causing Satan to brake and swerve. So मतलब गाड़ी एक तरह से घुमाना, very violent movement of the vehicle. The dog would make chase for 100 meters or so. So it would run behind the vehicle for about 100 meters before easing off, before deciding, chalo, jaane do. Having seen us off the property. So that entire thing they thought was their domain, their property, their territory. Dogs are also very territorial kind of animals, right? Especially the males. It wasn't difficult to understand why ferocious Tibetan Mastiffs became popular in China's imperial courts as hunting dogs. So they were so ferocious that they would be used as hunting dogs in the Chinese imperial courts, the royals of China, brought along the China Silk Road in ancient times as tribute from Tibet. So from Tibet ki taraf se taxes ke roop mein, these mastiffs were actually given to the rulers in China. So that's how they were used thereafter as hunting dogs in China. By now we could see snow-capped mountains, okay, gathering on the horizon. So they could see they were getting into the more mountainous area of Tibet. We entered a valley where the river was wide and mostly clogged with ice, brilliant white and glinting in the sunshine. So just see how he has described how the rivers actually looked. The trail hugged its bank, twisting with the meanders. Meanders matlab moving around like that, twisting around the path as we gradually gained height and the valley sides closed in. So the valley was closing in and you were getting into the more mountainous range. Okay, the trail means the trail of the river hugged its bank. So it was getting more and more narrow. The turns became sharper and the ride bumpier. Satan now in third gear as we continued to climb. Okay, so you couldn't go in very high gear, but you needed to accordingly navigate your way. The track moved away from the icy river, laboring through steeper slopes. So you have seen the Ghat section. You would have gone to any of the hill station, Mussoorie gaye ho, Dehradun gaye ho, Ooty gaye ho, Kodaikanal gaye ho. So you'll go through the Ghat section, what is called. The track moved away from the icy river, laboring through steeper slopes that sported big rocks daubed with patches of bright orange lichen. Now, lichen is a gray or yellow color plant. Daub means to spread. So this kind of vegetation was spread all over. Okay, the rocks. Beneath the rocks, hunks of snow clung on in the near permanent shade. I felt the pressure building up in my ears. Now, when you go on a height, even when you go in an aircraft, right, in an aeroplane, you would find the ears clogging, right, especially when it's taking off or when it is landing, because wo height ke difference ke wajah se it affects your ears. Similar thing is being felt by the author because he's not used to going on high altitude, climbing or driving up. So he's struggling. He's not talking about Satan, but he's talking about himself. I felt the pressure building up in my ears, held my nose, snorted and cleared them. So he's kind of trying to clear the system. When you go on an aircraft, you generally are told that you keep trying to swallow your own saliva. That also helps clear the ears. So he's trying to snort and clear his entire respiratory system. We struggled round another tight bend and Satan stopped. He had opened his door and jumped out of his seat before I realized what was going on. Snow, said Daniel as he too exited the vehicle, letting in a breath of cold air as he did so. So they have encountered snow, and as soon as the door was opened of the vehicle, cold air came in. So suddenly the weather has changed. The temperatures have dropped. Now, a swath of white stuff lay across the track. Swath essentially means a long strip. Okay. In front of us, stretching for maybe 15 meters before it petered out and the dirt trail reappeared. The snow continued on either side of us, smoothing the abrupt bank on the upslope side. The bank was too steep for our vehicle to scale. It was the bank which they were kind of climbing. Okay, bank is like a structure along the Ghat section that they were moving up around the mountainous path, right? So there was no way around the snow patch. I joined Daniel and Satan stepped up onto the encrusted snow and began to slither. Slither is the movement of a lizard. It's generally used for either a snake or a lizard for the reptile family, and slid forward. So very slowly trying to move forward, stamping his foot from time to time to ascertain how sturdy it was. Because agar ice is generally on top or niche kuch nahi hai, so the vehicle can go inside. So he's trying to find out whether the ice is really strong, whether the vehicle can go on top. I looked at my wristwatch. We were at 5,210 meters above sea level. So they were going up. The snow did not look too deep to me, but the danger wasn't its depth, Daniel said, so much as its icy top layer. Okay, if we slip off, the car can turn over. जैसे मैंने कहा, अगर वो slippery हो गया, so the vehicle can simply turn over. Turtle जैसे कहते हैं. He suggested, as we saw Satan grab handfuls of dirt and fling them across the frozen surface. We both pitched in, and when the snow was spread with soil, okay, so you're trying to kind of create a space where soil is there, right? And Daniel and I stayed out of the vehicle to lighten Satan's load. He backed up and drove towards the dirty snow, eased the car onto its icy surface, and slowly drove its length without apparent difficulty. So somehow they managed to drive by mixing up the soil and the snow so that there is, what is it called? Physics mein kya padha hai? Friction. 10 minutes later, we stopped at another blockage. Okay, और ये काफी बार होता है. If you have ever gone to Arunachal Pradesh, okay, you will find when you're going to Tawang kind of place in Arunachal, you will find this ice ho jata hai and you just get stranded on the way, stuck on the way. Okay, especially when there is snowfall. 10 minutes later, we stopped at another blockage. Not good, sir, Satan announced as he jumped out again to survey the scene. This time he decided to try and drive around the snow. The slope was steep and studded with major rocks, but somehow Satan negotiated them. His four-wheel drive vehicle, in these kind of places, normal vehicles will not do. You need a four-wheel drive vehicle, lurching from one obstacle to another. So he's trying to negotiate the different hurdles which are coming in the way. In so doing, he cut off one of the hairpin bends. Hairpin bends मालूम है आपको, hill station में जाते वक्त, which is very sharp. What does a hairpin look like? A hairpin जैसे लगाते हैं ना, girls and women. So it is very sharp. It is like very like that, right? So when the turning is also like that, it's called a hairpin bend. Regaining the trail further up where the snow had not drifted. I checked my watch again. Now we were at 5,400 meters and my head began to throb horribly because he's not used to that. I took gulps from my water bottle. You need to keep swallowing water or your saliva, which is supposed to help a rapid ascent when you're moving up. We finally reached the top of the pass at 5,515 meters. Okay. It was marked by a large cane of rocks. Cane of rocks is pile of stones in order to mark a particular place. ये आपको काफी सारे जगहों पे मिलेगा और उसमें कुछ ना कुछ कपड़ा वगैरह बांधा होता है to it's to signify a particular place. In some places it's to signify a holy place of kinds. With white silk scarves and ragged मतलब rough prayer flags. We all took a turn around the cane in a clockwise direction, as is the tradition. So as I said, no, it will have religious significance also. And Satan checked the tires of his vehicle. On his vehicle, he stopped at the petrol tank and partially unscrewed the top, which emitted a loud hiss. जैसे उसने पेट्रोल का टैंक खोला, हिस करके sound आया. The lower atmospheric pressure, because now they were at a height, right? Was allowing the fuel to expand, and that can be dangerous, right? It sounded dangerous to me. Maybe, sir, Satan laughed, but no smoking, right? Because the fuel is now expanding within the tank. My headache soon cleared as we careered down the other side of the path. So we have gone up and now they go down a little. It was 2 o'clock by the time we stopped for lunch. We ate hot noodles inside a long canvas tent, part of a work camp erected beside a dry salt lake. The plateau is pockmarked with salt flats and brackish lakes. Salt flats is flat land covered with layer of salt. Brackish means slightly salty. Vestiges ka matlab hai remains. Okay, what is remaining? Remaining of the Tethys Ocean, which bordered Tibet before the great continental collision that lifted it skyward. So it's talking about a long time back when the entire topography of Tibet had actually changed dramatically. This was one hive of activity. Men with pickaxes and shovels trudging back and forth in their long sheepskin coats and salt-encrusted boots. All wore sunglasses against the glare as a steady stream of blue trucks emerged from the blindingly white lake laden with piles of salt. Okay, so इस जगह पर काफी activity हो रही थी. Okay, because workers were actually trying to clear the entire path. Okay. By late afternoon, we had reached the small town of Hor. Now, this is an important. Ravu se abhi Hor pahunch gaye hain. Back on the main east-west highway that followed the old trade route from Lhasa to Kashmir. Okay, so they were now back on the same Silk Road. Okay, which connected Lhasa to Kashmir. Daniel, who was returning to Lhasa, found a ride in a truck, so Satan and I bade him farewell outside a tire repair shop. Okay, so Daniel abhi वापस चला जाता है. We had suffered 2 punctures. Okay, 2 puncture हो गए थे in quick succession on the drive down from the salt lake, and Satan was eager to have them fixed since they left him with no spares, right? Obviously. Besides, the second tire he had changed had been replaced by one that was as smooth as my bald head. What does it mean? Means that the tire had been completely worn out. Puri tarah se, it will not be able to grip the road. It had become completely smooth. Hor was a grim, miserable place. Now, he does not like Hor at all. There was no vegetation, just dust and rocks. This description is important. Please make a note of it. Liberally scattered with years of accumulated refuse. That is, वहां पर काफी सारा कूड़ा था, garbage. accumulated refuse means garbage, which was unfortunate given that the town sat on the shore of Lake Mansarovar. Mansarovar का नाम आपने सुना होगा. Hor was located on the shores of Lake Mansarovar, Tibet's most venerated stretch of water. Venerated means respected, maybe even worshipped. Ancient Hindu and Buddhist cosmology pinpoints Mansarovar as the source of 4 great Indian rivers. And this is important कि मानसरोवर से ही 4 नदियां निकलती हैं. The Indus, the Ganga, the Satluj and the Brahmaputra. यानी कि बाद में आके गंगोत्री वगैरह पास में है, वहां से गंगा निकलती है. बट लेक मानसरोवर इज लाइक द फाउंटेन हेड वेयर ऑल दीज डिफरेंट रिवर्स गेट ऑफ. दो इन टिपिकल जियोग्राफिकल टर्म्स अगर देखा जाए तो ओनली द सतलज फ्लोज फ्रॉम द लेक मानसरोवर. बट the headwaters means streams which are forming the source of the other 3 rivers, Indus, Ganges and Brahmaputra, all rise nearby on the flanks of Mount Kailash. They're all nearby on the different parts of Mount Kailash. We were within striking distance of the great mountain and I was eager to forge ahead, means move ahead. But I had to wait. Satan told me to go and drink some tea in Hor's only cafe, which like all other buildings in town was constructed from badly painted concrete and had 3 broken windows. So he's describing that particular restaurant, that cafe. Okay, the good view of the lake through one of them helped me to compensate for the drought. Drought means a strong current of wind. Okay, ये DRAUGHT है, इस बात का आप ध्यान रखिएगा. Okay. I was served by a Chinese youth in military uniform who spread the grease around my table. थोड़ा grease था, उसने और उसको फैला दिया in order to clean it with a filthy rag. So, the garbage in the town and the filthy rag. So it doesn't convey a very neat impression of the whole town or of the people, right? Before bringing me a glass and a thermos of tea. Half an hour later, Satan relieved me from my solitary confinement. यानी कि अभी तक मैं अकेला था, आधे घंटे बाद वो आया, and we drove past a lot more rocks and rubbish westwards out of town towards Mount Kailash. My experience in Hor came as a stark contrast to accounts I had read of earlier travelers. Now before coming, he had read accounts of how Hor was of other experiences of other travelers. And he had read specifically about 2 travelers. But his own experience of Hor was very different from the experience that they had written about. The first one was about Eikai Kawaguchi. Okay, Kawasaki ki tarah hai na, Kawasaki ki tarah hai. A Japanese monk who had arrived there in 1900, and he was so moved, yani ki he became so emotional by the sanctity of the lake. That is, sanctity, matlab, it looks very sacred, right? Of the lake, that he burst into tears, that he kind of started crying. A couple of years later, the hallowed waters, hallowed means again very respected, venerated waters, had a similar effect on Sven Hedin, a Swede from Sweden, who wasn't prone to sentimental outbursts. Now, he was not known to have these kind of sentimental outbursts of crying, but he also had a very similar kind of a reaction to Lake Mansarovar and the Hor town. But our author did not have any such experience. In fact, he was very disgusted by the garbage, the accumulated refuse of Hor town. It was dark by the time we finally left again, and after 10:30 p.m. we drew up outside a guest house in Darchin for what turned out to be another troubled night. Kicking around in the open air rubbish dump that passed for the town of Hor. Now it's his accumulated refuse. Now he's calling it open air rubbish dump. Okay. He had again started getting that cold back. Though if truth be told, it had never quite disappeared with my herbal tea. Or chai peene se it had not kind of disappeared. One of my nostrils was blocked again, and as I lay down to sleep, I wasn't convinced that the other would provide me with sufficient oxygen. Agar ek nostril block hai, ek se saans lene se will he be able to kind of get enough oxygen? He wasn't sure about. My watch told me that I was at 4,760 meters of sea level. It wasn't much higher than Ravu, and there I had been gasping for oxygen several times. So at Ravu and this place Hor were almost at the same level. I had grown accustomed to these nocturnal disturbances. Nocturnal matlab something which happens at night, but they still scared me. He was a little scared whether he will get very breathless. Tired and hungry, I started breathing through my mouth. For after a while, I switched to single nostril power. That is, he was breathing only with a single nostril, which seemed to be admitting enough oxygen. But just as I was drifting off, meaning he was feeling sleepy, I woke up abruptly. Something was wrong. My chest felt strangely heavy, and I sat up a moment that cleared my nasal passages almost instantly and relieved the feeling in my chest. So almost miraculously, his chest became clear. I lay back down and tried again. Same result. I was on the point of disappearing into the land of Nod when something told me not to. Nod means he was going to fall asleep. It must have been those emergency electrical impulses again, but this was not the same as on previous occasions. This time, I wasn't gasping for breath. I was simply not allowed to go to sleep. Okay. So he wasn't feeling sleepy, and there was something very strange. He wasn't feeling well at all. All that height and traveling, everything was having its effect on the author. Sitting up once more immediately made me feel better. I could breathe freely. So if he was sitting up, he was feeling better. He was lying down, he wasn't feeling so good. And my chest felt fine. But as soon as I lay down, my sinuses filled up and my chest was odd. Okay. I tried propping myself upright against the wall. Against the wall, he was lying like sitting like that. But now I couldn't manage to relax enough to drop off. But that posture he was not able to fall asleep. I couldn't put my finger on the reason, but I was afraid to go to sleep. A little voice inside me was saying that if I did, I might never wake up again. So I stayed awake all night. So he was feeling scared कि अगर सो गया, so he may die in his sleep and he will never wake up again. So he decided to stay awake, which is a very strange thing. Death is a very strange kind of fear. You don't want to die. As I say, all of us want to go to heaven, but we don't want to die, right? Because it's the unknown. So we are all very scared of it. So he thinks that if I sleep, I may actually die in sleep. So he doesn't sleep. Satan took me to the Darchan Medical College the following morning. The medical college at Darchan was new and looked like a monastery from the outside, a Buddhist monastery with a very solid door that led into a large courtyard. Just look at the descriptions. We found the consulting room, which was dark and cold and occupied by a Tibetan doctor who wore none of the paraphernalia. Now, what does that mean? That when you're a doctor, you're expected to wear a white coat with a stethoscope, the usual things. How do you recognize a doctor? But this particular doctor wasn't wearing any of that. No white coat. He looked like any other Tibetan with a thick pullover and a woolly hat. When I explained my sleepless symptoms, that I've not been able to sleep, and my sudden aversion means I don't want to dislike for lying down, he shot me a few questions while feeling the veins in my wrist. It's a cold and the effects of altitude, the height. I'll give you something for it. I asked him if he thought I would recover enough to be able to do the Kora, the pilgrimage. Oh yes, you will be fine. I walked out of the medical college clutching a brown envelope stuffed with 15 screws of paper. Screws of paper essentially means small paper packets. I had a 5-day course of Tibetan medicine, which I started right away. I opened an after breakfast package and found it contained a brown powder that I had to take with hot water. It tasted just like cinnamon. Cinnamon को हिंदी में क्या बोलते हैं? दालचीनी, brown powder, right? The contents of the lunchtime and bedtime packages were less obviously identifiable. Both contained small spherical brown pellets, round thing. And he says that they suspiciously look like sheep dung. But of course, I took them that night. Actually, he slept very well. He slept like a log, not a dead man, he says. The idiom is there. I slept like a log. That means you sleep very well. But he says not like a dead man. Once he saw that I was going to leave Satan left me. जब Satan को पता चला कि ये थोड़ा ठीक ठाक हो गया, तो Satan decided to leave, to return to Lhasa. As a Buddhist, he told me, and this is again a significant paragraph, he knew that it did not really matter if I passed away. Satan felt that even if he died, it was okay because Buddhists believed in life after death. So it was okay if he actually passed away, and especially when he has come to do the Kora, etc. But he thought it will be bad for his business. Agar kisi ko pata chala ki iska koi customer actually has died, then it will be bad publicity for his business. But he, as a Buddhist, he didn't seem to mind. So this paragraph is important. Iske bare mein maine question bhi likha hai, answer bhi likha hai. Darchan did not look so horrible after a good night's sleep. So it was still dusty, partially derelict. Derelict means very rundown kind of place, and punctuated by heaps of rubble and refuse. Same like Hor. But the sun shone brilliantly in a clear blue sky, and the outlook across the plain to the south gave me a vision of the Himalayas, commanded by a huge snow-capped mountain. Gudla Mandata with just a wisp of cloud suspended over its summit. So that's the name of the what he was seeing out there. The town had a couple of rudimentary, means very small general stores selling Chinese cigarettes, soap, and other basic provisions, as well as the usual strings of prayer flags. And in front of one, men gathered in the afternoon for a game of pool. Pool means something similar to billiards and snooker. The battered table looking supremely incongruous. Incongruous means completely out of place. That is, it should not be there, but it had been put there, that table, right? While nearby women washed their long hair in the icy water of a narrow brook. Brook means a stream. That babbled is a sound which is created down past my guest house. You know, if you've gone to hill station, that's how the houses are, right? I mean, there is no symmetry in that sense. Darchan felt relaxed and unhurried, but for me, it came with a significant drawback. There were no pilgrims. There were no pilgrims because at the height of the pilgrimage season, this place is full. But the pilgrimage season had not yet started, in the sense it had just come at the beginning of the pilgrimage season. So the pilgrims had not started coming in large numbers. Okay. Many brought their own accommodation, enlarging the settlement around the edges. That is, they would bring their tents, and that entire Darchen town would actually become bigger because they would all pitch their tents on the outskirts. So the town itself became bigger as a result. I had timed my arrival for the beginning of the season, but it seemed I was too early. One afternoon, I sat pondering my options. That is, he was thinking कि मैं क्या करूं अभी, over a glass of tea in Darchan's only cafe. After a little consideration, I concluded that they were fairly severely limited. कि मेरे पास ज़्यादा options नहीं थे. Clearly, I had not made much progress with my self-help program on positive thinking. He believed that, I should think positive, so positive hoga. Right? But it was obviously not helping because nothing positive was happening to him, because there is no way he could go on the Quora alone, because he needed somebody who would know English with who he could communicate. In my defense, it had not been easy with all my sleeping difficulty plus his health problems. But however I looked at it, I could only wait. The pilgrimage trail was well trodden. But I did not fancy doing it alone. The Quora was seasonal because parts of the route were liable to blockage by snow. Even if he started, there will be snowfall somewhere and he would get stuck if he went alone. I had no idea whether or not the snow had cleared, but I was not encouraged by the chunks of dirty ice that still clung to the banks of Darchan's brook. So along the banks, you could see those ice. And that gave him an indication कि अभी भी snowfall पास में जरूर हो रहा होगा. Since Satan had left, I had not come across anyone in Darchan with enough English to answer even this most basic question, ki whether the snowfall is taking place there or not. Until that is, I met Norbu. So now Norbu, the last character of the story, makes an appearance. The cafe was small, dark, and cavernous. Cavernous means looking like a cave, with a long metal stove that ran down the middle. The walls and ceiling were wreathed in sheets of multicolored plastic of this striped variety. Okay, so there's a lot of plastic out there. Again, not considered very good. Broad blue, red, and white that is made into stout, voluminous shopping bags sold all over China. Okay, and in many countries of Asia as well as Europe. As such, plastic must rate as one of China's most successful exports along with the Silk Road today. So a lot of plastic is actually manufactured and exported from China. The cafe had a single window beside which I had taken up position so that I could see the pages of my notebook. I had also brought a novel with me to help pass the time. Norbu saw my book when he came in and asked with a gesture if he could sit opposite me at my rickety. Rickety means not very strong table, slightly unstable, unsteady. You English, he inquired after he had ordered tea. I told him I was, and we struck up a conversation. I didn't think that he was from those parts because he was wearing a wind cheater. Okay, that means he wasn't used to the cold, right? And metal rimmed spectacles of a Western style. So just look at the description. Your description of Norbu is also important. He was Tibetan, he told me, but worked in Beijing. Okay, at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences in the Institute of Ethnic Literature. Please make a note of this. Norbu ke character sketch mein aapko ye details likhne padenge. Okay, you will have to write these details of Norbu in any character sketch of Norbu. I assume that he was on some sort of field work. He had come on some kind of collection of data or do some research from the field. Yes and no, I have come to do the Quora. Ah, very good. My heart jumped. Norbu had been writing academic papers about the Kailash Quora and its importance in various works of Buddhist literature for many years, he told me, but he had never done it himself. He had never come on a Quora, but he had been writing many papers for many years, right? When the time came for me to tell him what brought me to Darchan, his eyes lit up. We could be a team. So before the author said it, Norbu said, we could be a team. Two academics who have escaped from the library. What does it mean? That you have removed ourselves from academic work and we are here on the field, right? So the author feels happy that my positive thinking is having some effect now. So now something good is happening to me because I finally found someone who could accompany me on to do the Kora. My initial relief at meeting Norbu, who was also staying in the guest house, was tempered by the realization that he was almost as ill-equipped. He was happy, but tempered means usse thoda uska enthusiasm kam ho gaya. His enthusiasm reduced a little when he realized that Norbu was also as ill-equipped as he was to undertake the Kora. He kept telling me how fat he was and how hard it was going to be. Very high up. Character sketches of the author and character sketch of Norbu, I repeat, are important. He kept reminding me so tiresome to walk. He wasn't really a practicing Buddhist. But he had enough enthusiasm, and of course he was Tibetan. Okay, so you need to know all these details. Although I had originally envisaged making the trek in the company of devout believers, someone who are more religious, but now he was happy going with Norbu. I decided that Norbu would turn out to be the ideal companion because he suggested that we hire some yaks. Yaks, you know, not exactly like oxes or buffaloes, but with a lot of hair, and they are found in places like Mongolia and Tibet. He suggested that we hire some yaks to carry our luggage so that you don't have to carry it, which I interpreted as a good sign. And he had no intention of prostrating himself all around the mountain. He's not kind of, trying to go down like that. Not possible. And what's the reason he gives for that? Important, please note. Collapsing across the table in hysterical laughter. He's very amused by his own joke. He says, one, it was not my style to prostrate. And anyway, his tummy is too big, that I'm just too fat. So while the author is a bald-headed person like me, I'm not bald. I've shaved off my hair. Okay, there's a difference. And his tummy is too big as far as Norbu is concerned. Okay, so with this, we come to the end of the Silk Road. I hope you found it interesting. There's a lot of description in this particular story, which you would do well to remember. There are a whole lot of question and answers that I've written in the PDF notes. Please go through them and you will find it pretty easy to deal with. Thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.